Let's pivot to the Browns, where Jimmy Haslam once blamed drafting Johnny Manziel on a homeless guy's suggestion as he walked into the facility. It wasn't Jimmy Haslam's idea.
That's a good segue.
It was the homeless guy. Odell Beckham Jr., and I assume it wasn't Jimmy Haslam's idea to trade for Odell Beckham Jr. in 2019. He hasn't been traded. And who wants him at this point? Who's taking on the salary? Who's going to give the Browns value? I think part of it, too, is it kind of bubbled up too quickly that maybe Odell wants out. But it became clear today Odell wants out. He hasn't said a word about it. But it's not an accident or a coincidence that on the same day, the day of the trade deadline, both Odell Beckham Sr. and LeBron James chime in on social media. Dad posted an 11-minute video of all the times that Odell Beckham Jr. was open and Baker Mayfield missed him or didn't throw it to him, which is hilarious and accurate. And then LeBron James tweeted, basically, free OBJ. And they're friends. This isn't some random NBA player who happens to be a fan of Odell Beckham Jr. They're friends. They have a relationship. So I think this was Odell Beckham Jr.'s way of getting out there what he wants. And now Kevin Stefanski is going to have some interesting questions tomorrow when he has his next media availability, because he's going to have to deal with this. What do you do? Do you renew your vows and you find a way to make it work with OBJ, or you just cut him? You just cut him. You cut him and you hope somebody claims him on waivers, and then you're no longer financially responsible. But, Baker Mayfield's a guy who's been thrown into the middle of this. He may have some opinions. And if he goes to Kevin Stefanski tomorrow morning and they have a conversation behind closed doors, and I doubt that Baker Mayfield will be bashful about saying, can we please get this guy the hell out of here? That's going to be an issue for the Browns, Shireen.
Yeah, it almost seems at this point, Mike, that it's too toxic for him to return to that locker room. That's just the way it appears to me. And I have questions, seriously, about how good Odell Beckham is. I mean, the first 3 years, yes, he made the Pro Bowl and he had over 1,000 years. But since that 2016 season, he hasn't been good. I mean, he just hasn't. And you talk about not throwing to him. I mean, the criticism in 2019 was they tried to force the ball into him every single play. Baker targeted him 133 times, and he had only 74 catches, and it was stop targeting Odell Beckham. And then last year, what happens? He has the torn ACL. He leaves. They make the postseason. So at this point, I think it's clear. I think they have evidence from last year that this is a team that's better off without Odell Beckham. So at this point, you cut your losses, say goodbye. We didn't get anything for him. So what? Hopefully somebody picks him up on waivers.
And remember when somebody asked Baker Mayfield after the Week 7 injury that ended Odell Beckham Jr.'s season last year, he was actually trying to make a tackle after an interception when it happened. Mayfield got salty about the idea that they're better off without Baker Mayfield, and they ended up being better off, or without Odell Beckham, and then ended up being better off without him. I think back to the game against the Cowboys Week 4 of last year. That was when Kevin Stefanski made a concerted effort to involve Odell Beckham Jr. in the offensive game plan, because there's two ways to get the ball in the hands of a playmaker. One, you have him run his route, and you hope that his number is called in the progression and the ball is successfully delivered to him down the field. And I think in 2019, undue pressure was put on Baker Mayfield under the Freddie Kitchens regime to get the ball to OBJ. Jarvis Landry was chiming in on that. It was a constant thing because Beckham genuinely believed, number one, we're losing, and number two, I'm not getting the ball. So number three, if I was getting the ball more, we'd be winning. When Stefanski arrived early on, he did, and I've got the stats up here. Beckham had 2 rushes for 73 yards and a touchdown against the Cowboys. He had 5 catches for 81 yards and 2 more touchdowns. One of them was thrown to him by Jarvis Landry. And you don't have to just, hope the guy gets open. You can do bubble screens, jet sweeps, put him in the backfield and hand it off to him or toss it to him. There are ways to get a guy who is very skilled with the football in his hands to get the ball in his hands. And they haven't done that this year. They could have used him on Sunday against the Steelers, Shireen. He had 1 catch for 6 yards, and that was it. And Stefanski said earlier this week, I need to do a better job of getting Odell Beckham Jr. involved. And there's no middle ground here. Either they resolve to get him involved or they admit, we have evolved away from OBJ. It was John Dorsey who was the GM. It was Freddie Kitchens who was the head coach. It's all changed now. We're moving forward without OBJ. And if we don't get anything for him, we don't get anything for him. Maybe we get lucky and somebody grabs his contract on waivers and we don't have to pay him anymore.
Yeah, and they need to figure it out quickly, Mike, and so he doesn't go in that locker room and become a distraction for that team. Either they figure out a way to get him involved. Like you said, that Cowboys game was the one game when you look at and you go, hey, he was really involved and he was a big part of that game and a big reason they won that game. So either you find those ways to use him, which if you were going to do that, why haven't you already done that this season? I realized he had the shoulder injury and was out part of the season and coming back off that torn ACL. Nonetheless, if that was your plan, why didn't you already do that? And secondly, if you're not going to get him involved, if it's going to be like it's been, then he needs to move on. He needs to go somewhere else. It would be better off for the Browns and better off for Odell Beckham if he's somewhere else, if this is how it's going to be with him in Cleveland.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.